All right, voice is starting to come back a little bit today. We're getting there. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. It's Dallas Mavericks Day on the show. We're going to be speeding through a whole bunch of names on today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Dan Vespers. Hit that like button and subscribe as we dive in to the Mavericks roster. They went 39-43 last year, largely with players that aren't there either anymore or at the moment, meaning Luka Doncic, now a Laker, Kyrie Irving, now injured, but got Cooper Flagg. So all is, I guess, kind of certainly okay-ish in Mavs country. The players that I want to talk about, obviously Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Cooper Flagg are on the list, but I also want to talk about the center situation, which is weird to say that and not be referring to Anthony Davis. The replacement for Kyrie Irving situation, and then a couple of guys that are probably going to get a bit squeezed out by what's been going on in terms of players being added and just general overall health. And that's left us with a pretty good list of players to talk about. Let's start with Anthony Davis. He's going to be their best per game guy this coming year, has been for a long time. But obviously the knock on AD is that he doesn't often make it through a season. And that is at times very accurate and at other times somewhat inaccurate, which if you've got that much of a coin flip going on, it probably makes it more accurate than inaccurate. Final season in LA, where he played a full year, he made it through 76 games. But then this most recent season, he missed 31 combined between the two organizations. It wouldn't have been quite so severe had he not re-aggravated his groin situation when coming over to Dallas, came back too soon, and then didn't play for like another 6 weeks or something after that. So what probably should have been about a 3, 4, 5 week absence became, more like 2.5, 3 months. And that's that's not fair. More like 2 months. And that's what detonated his year, which might have only been, 10 to 12 missed ball games and then jumped up a massive number from there. So what do we expect this coming season? It's kind of hard to say. Obviously, the injury stuff is always going to be hanging over AD, who had an awesome year by all accounts when he was on the floor. His Dallas time was not an accurate representation of what he'll be. He only played 29.5 minutes with the Mavs because he was being sort of kid-gloved a little bit. Typically, you'll see him up around what he did with the Lakers before being traded. 26 points. He was at 12 rebounds, 3.5 assists, over a steal, over 2 blocks. He's a fantasy juggernaut, again, when available. He was number 4 in 9 cat per game. There was a big drop-off between 3 and 4 this last year. Top 3 was Jokic, who was way out number 1. Shea and Wemby were kind of tied for number 2 in per-game numbers. And then there was this massive chasm, like the size of a first-rounder, between Wemby and AD. But that's still pretty good. Top 5, even if you want to call it a clear second or third tier kind of first-rounder. He is always going to be among those guys. So the question becomes, where do we take Anthony Davis this coming season? Obviously, you're not going to take him in the top 3. There's no Halliburton this coming year. Luka's floating around. He's figures to be someone that goes kind of in that top area. Guys like Anthony Edwards, James Harden are going to be going pretty early this year because they were good last season. Not great. They were second rounders per game, but they played in most basketball games. There's going to be arguments about Kevin Durant and Karl Anthony Towns taking place in there. There'll be some arguments about Steph Curry, but AD is going to be right in the mix with those guys. And now you're balancing per game upside versus health fears with other guys that are potentially older than Anthony Davis, who just happened to miss fewer games than Anthony Davis this last year. Like Steph Curry's an old dude, but he only missed 12 games this year. Do we trust him more? Luka Doncic is much younger, but he missed 32 games this last year. Yeah, finals hangover and out of shape Luka and all that stuff. But regardless, he actually missed a game more than AD did this past season. And Tatum's not around, so he's not going to be clogging up draft boards in the first round either. So honest to goodness, I don't know what you do there because none of those guys is risk-free. Cat only missed 10 games, but he'd had a bunch of years where he missed a lot of basketball. None of those guys is without risk. Once you get through really like Jokic and Shea, you can feel kind of safe about. But the quote unquote safe guys, if you want to call him, I guess it's Anthony Edwards is the safe guy in there. Like, can you really argue to take AD or Anthony Edwards, who was number 16 per game, a good deal behind Anthony Davis? Can you make an argument to take Edwards over AD? Even though you know one of those guys per game is going to boat race the other? That's a really tough argument to make. It's one of the reasons I like GamesCap Roto more, but also, I think you could probably say something along the lines of maybe Steph you could put in that mix. Do you trust Kevin Durant to make it through 70 games? Do you trust these guys to play more than Anthony Davis to the point where it covers up his per game advantage? I think Luka will go ahead of him because I don't think people think Luka's going to be missing 30 games a year. I think they feel like this one was more the aberration. But once you get to like pick 5, what do you do? I truly don't have the answer for you right now. If you're in head-to-head, you probably try to hold off because of the risk factor. With Roto, you can take the chance a little bit more, but at the same time, I think the biggest lesson we learned this season was that it's better to play it safe when you can. Can you, though? I think you got to push him down the board at least a few slots, but there's almost no way you can push him past about pick 7 or 8 with all the guys that are off the board right now. And that's going to make this year extra tough. Guys, BetOnline continues to be your number one source for sports betting action with baseball in full swing, football around the corner, UFC, tennis, WNBA, those football futures we were talking about, soccer. There's more. We've gone through the list a million times. BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, scores, and even live in-game betting. That's for the true degens out there. Plus, between action, go to the BetOnline casino. Enjoy some Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. And for a limited time, if you work with BetOnline today, you can take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. So that's the AD story. I know it wasn't super clear, but you're probably still taking him around 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range, and I doubt he falls any farther than that. Kyrie Irving is the next name on the board. We don't know exactly when he'll be back. He missed about the last 2-ish, little less, months of basketball after suffering a season-ending knee injury this year. Assumption then would be that he'd be targeting a return somewhere around a year from when that happened, which would put him somewhere in the February-March range, which also means that he is not draftable. Outside of keeper leagues where you can keep a guy the following year at some kind of discount, where you can, maybe get Kyrie in like the 7th or 8th round of a keeper, and then you keep him in like a 5th or 6th round price the following season. This year, we're going to keep it simple. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, you might squeeze out a game or two from him during your fantasy playoffs if he just happens to make it back in the nick of time. But even then, they're not going to be pushing him. They're going to be hoping to get him very slowly ramped up to be useful enough for a playoff run. That's the goal with Kyrie Irving. They do not care how much he does during the regular season. You can expect some low 20s minutes games, and yeah, he'll be good in those because he's freaking Kyrie, but you're not going to be getting, I'd be surprised, frankly, if he played a single regular season game this year where he got up to 34, 35 minutes. But even if he does, he ain't playing back-to-backs. He'll probably get other days off in there as well. They're going to be going very gently with him. And you're probably looking at about a 15 to 20 game season in a good scenario for Kyrie this year. That is not enough to draft. Even in Roto, if you have like 3, 4 IL slots, you could just plop him one of those on the Roto side and bring him back when he's playing, 23 minutes a game or more or something. But I see almost no reason to deal with Kyrie. Next name I want to talk about, and let's get into the center situation in Dallas. And by the way, like I mentioned, my voice could go at a moment's notice. So we're going to try to keep this show in the 22 minutes or under range. Is Derek Lively the second? And he's part of sort of a double whammy here for the Mavs because last year we know that Daniel Gafford actually had the better fantasy season between the two Maverick centers. Gafford was number 95. Lively was number 104. Yeah, I know. Hair splitting 101 there. That basically means that they have the same overall value. Lively's value was I mean, their stat lines were not all that different. Gafford scored more, Lively rebounded a little bit more. Their defensive stats and field goal percent were almost exactly the same. Free throw shooting, neither one of them particularly good there. Lively did get 2.5 assists during his time on the floor, and it does feel like he's the guy that they want to be their starter, but they also extended Gafford this offseason. So the plan, it seems at least, is to continue to roll him out there, and Anthony Davis is your power forward. But this kind of screws things up because Gafford was able to pile up his numbers once AD and Lively missed games, because Derek Lively missed half the season this year, and AD was not there for a bunch, the first, whatever it was, 45, 50 games this season. And so Gafford, if you just look at the games where he was the backup center to Derek Lively, he wasn't a top 100 player. Meaning, as we sort of localize on this, and I do have a Daniel Gafford tab that I can just flip up on the screen real quick so you can see what his face looks like. But this discussion is more about Derek Lively, so that's really the guy that I'd rather look at. Lively is, to me, probably right on the border of being fantasy draftable. His value, as was Gafford's, went up if you were not super concerned about free throw shooting. Both of those guys were not great. Gafford took more at a slightly better percentage, but it sort of, by weighted averages, it kind of was, it almost leveled off to basically the same number. But then, if Lively can stay healthy the whole year, one would assume that his minutes will be better. And in 23 minutes a game, he was right on the edge of 9 category startable numbers. So could he stay healthy enough to play 24 or 25? I think you can do better is kind of where I'm at with the center situation there. You guys know I like Daniel Gafford's numbers. If he got moved, I would then take a very long look at him, and maybe he's somebody that they try to pivot away from partway through the year. It feels harder now that he got a contract extension, but main point of all of this is you're probably not drafting Gafford, even though he had a better fantasy season. He did a lot of that damage when the guys in front of him were not there. And with Lively, you could, it'll come down a little bit to where he's going, as is the case with so many of the players that we talk about during these team previews or reviews or whatever you want to call it. If Derek Lively's getting drafted in like the 130s, 140s, 150s, I think he's worth a shot there. If you have to take him near 105 where he finished last year, I don't think I would do it. I'm just concerned because the Mavs, in addition to having 2 centers and Anthony Davis who can play center, they're just big. They've got PJ Washington, who has played center in the past, was their small forward for long stretches this last year. And they added Cooper Flagg to the mix, who's not a small dude. Surprised the hell out of me to see him sort of up close, not that close, I guess, but at Summer League, where you're relatively close to these guys. He's a big guy. Cooper Flagg is 6'8", and probably getting bigger because he's, 18 years old right now? No, 20. Sorry, I was off by a little bit. I was still growing when I was 20. Not by a lot, but he could get an inch taller. He'll probably get thicker. The Mavs are massive. I just don't see how there's enough opportunity for either Lively or Gafford with everybody healthy. And that, of course, is the big caveat because nobody makes it through an NBA season anymore. Tiny, tiny fraction of a percentage of players that actually survive an NBA season without missing more than, 6 or 7 ball games. But that's not enough anyway. The reason that Gafford had a good season was because Derek Lively missed half the year. It wasn't because Lively missed 2 to 3 weeks. He missed 2 to 3 months. Why didn't Lively have a better year? Well, because he's just kind of fine. He's not a world beater. Every once in a while, he'll have, and YouTubers can see it, like a January 9th game was shortly before he missed 3 months. He went for 21 and 16 with 3 blocks in that one. But what do they actually want to do with this dude? So I don't want to go overboard. I mean, obviously there's, if you wipe out the last 5 games when Lively came back just before the playoffs, his numbers look a bit better, and we can use the Basketball Monsters deal to put in a date range and basically just say, all right, well, how did Lively do before he got hurt. And so effectively through the new year. Wait, let's not punt. He was number 93 in 24 minutes a game during that stretch. So again, squeezed his way inside. Team didn't have Anthony Davis at that point. So also didn't have Cooper Flagg. So life just got harder for these guys. It's basically where we're looking. So to me, Derek Lively, the upside there is probably 80 to 90 range. The downside is significant if minutes get shaved in any meaningful way. That's why I would think about targeting with more like an 11th, 12th, or 13th round pick, because you'll get some center stats out of him. Like he's not going to completely vanish, but I also don't think that they're about to force feed him 27 minutes a game. And that's generally what you're looking for the guys you're taking around 100, 105, 110 are guys that have the chance to jump 2, 3, 4 rounds higher than that. And I don't think either of the Maverick centers can do that this coming year. Let's talk Kyrie Irving backup before I'm sort of looping back around to Cooper Flagg. I feel like he'll be kind of a fun one to do basically last on today's show. And that's D'Angelo Russell, who the Mavericks brought in to basically just be the point guard until Kyrie Irving comes back. And I know what you're saying. As soon as I said it, a bunch of you were like, they're just going to let Cooper Flagg be the point guard. I think that's probably more of a not longer-term goal, but like a medium-term goal is to run more offense through Cooper. But I also don't think that they want to lump too much on their new prized asset as he just comes out of college. The NBA game comes at you fast. We've seen it a million times, even with guys that are like bona fide point guards. So I don't think they're going to run their offense through Cooper Flagg. They have Anthony Davis still. And so a lot of what D'Lo is going to be doing is pick and roll stuff with AD, which creates things for other guys on the floor, in addition to stuff for Anthony Davis. It's just a good starting point to kind of get the defense moving. And then you're going to get a engaged, but not ultra high usage version of D'Angelo Russell. So what I'm thinking here on the D'Lo front is you're not going to get the fully disengaged D'Lo that you got with the Lakers this past season before they traded him out. And you're also not going to get the ultra locked in D'Angelo Russell that you got in his in that good season in LA, the sort of in between when he got traded season, then there was the full season, then there was the when he got traded again season. That full season when he averaged 18 and 6 in Los Angeles, that was like more of the better case scenario. What did he do right when he got traded to LA? That was also pretty good. Minnesota, he put up some pretty good numbers. There's probably kind of an in-between here because Anthony Davis is obviously going to be ahead of him, which he was, by the way, also in Los Angeles. It's kind of funny that those two are reunited here and got there in two different ways. And Kyrie's not there, but LA had LeBron and Austin Reeves. And so when you kind of look at it just from a like, what are the Mavs going to look like on opening day this coming season? D'Lo could be like a third, fourth option, which is basically what he was in Los Angeles. And it doesn't take him a billion shots to get to pretty good fantasy numbers. Like, he was at 13-ish shots in LA, and he was putting up 17 and 6. I don't think he's going to average 17 and 6, but, that was like top 65, top 70 type numbers. I do think D'Lo is going to be a top 100 guy for the first couple of months this coming year, which, there's a value in that no matter what format you're in. If you're in head-to-head, maybe he helps get you off to a quick start. Obviously, Roto, you just collect whatever you collect, and then when he turns sour at some point in the year, you'd kick him to the curb. Either way is fine. Probably more value in a rotisserie league because you keep whatever stats he brought you, but and let that sort of dictate where you think about then drafting him. Roto, he could be in with your sort of second tier of flyers. I wouldn't take him over the first tier of flyers because you want somebody that's got a shot to be something awesome all year before you get into the like, oh, well, I'll take good numbers for 2 months guy. D'Lo falls into the Al Horford bucket. The Al Horford bucket last year was play Al Horford until Kristaps Porzingis came back. Now, Porzingis came back sooner than we expected, so the Horford fun evaporated somewhat quicker than expected also. But with D'Lo, like, we know there's going to be a pretty good runway here. And the question then becomes, how much does he actually get to do with it? And I think we're probably looking at, like I said, somewhere between, like, a best case scenario would be 65. A more likely scenario is probably like, top 90, top 100 kind of numbers for a few months. And that's pretty good. But that's the kind of thing you probably target more like 125 range in drafts. Maybe you go a little bit earlier in Roto, but I don't think I'd go any earlier than that in head-to-head. Klay Thompson, I want nothing to do with. I know that Kyrie was out. We saw Klay play a bunch of games even when Kyrie was not there, even when Anthony Davis was not there, and it still was ugly because he's old and he's slow and he can't create his own shot anymore. So just don't delude yourself into thinking that old man Klay is about to have some massive resurgence. And it's not that he's too old to be good. It's just that all those catastrophic injuries just took the grease out of the wheels. He's a rickety old jalopy now, and the numbers follow it. He's going to hit a bunch of three-pointers, and he's going to do nothing else. He hit 3 3-pointers a game on a really good clip, but he can't hit his twos. He doesn't get to the foul line. He doesn't rebound, pass, steal, or block really anymore. So what is that? That is a 3-point specialist. When he's got, 3 games in 4 nights or 4 games in 5 nights or something, you can drop him into a head-to-head lineup and collect 12 threes and then be done with it. Also, likely not draftable this coming year was a guy that I was kind of high on this past season, and overall it panned out relatively well, and that was PJ Washington, because he does have a pretty diverse fantasy stat set. And, there's a chance that he plays enough while Kyrie is out or while they're kind of working Cooper Flagg into the mix, but I don't think there's almost any chance that he does as much this coming season as he did this past season. And so if that's your barometer, and PJ was just inside the top 109 cat, and it goes down anything, then he probably falls outside the top 100. That said, PJ Washington is a bad percentages guy that somehow managed to get inside the top 100 despite that, and it's because he does have a versatile fantasy game outside of the poor efficiency numbers. So if you're not targeting one of those, even like field goal or free throw, if you toggle either one of those off, that's what's fun about the basketball monster stuff, he moves inside the top 100. Field goal turns off, he moves inside the top 90. Free throw turns off, he moves inside the top 80. So there's like a lot of pathways you could still see for PJ to be somewhat useful, but maybe it's more like the D'Angelo Russell situation where, hey, perhaps there's a little bit of a lane when there's more usage up for grabs and maybe it disappears. Still, with Cooper Flagg in the mix, it does feel like PJ's probably the guy that kind of gets aced out of whatever he was doing last year. Because if we're being completely honest with ourselves and trying to figure out a Mavs starting 5, there are a couple of guys that you can pretty much guarantee are playing. I mean, one of those is Anthony Davis. That's a pretty easy one. Kyrie's out, so can't put him in there. I think Derek Lively is a definite start. I think Klay is a definite start, although I guess it's that's not set in stone. So there's a lot of weird little things that could happen, but I do think they probably want Klay for the floor spacing. If you take him out of the mix and Kyrie's hurt, then D'Lo is kind of the only guy that can shoot in that starting 5. If you went Lively, AD, PJ, Cooper, D'Lo, it's almost, like nobody can shoot. So I feel like you probably see Klay in there over PJ Washington, even if PJ still gets like 27, 28 minutes a game cycling in off the bench, but they've also got other players that they can cycle in off the bench. Trying to think of who else on the Mavs that I didn't talk about today that could get in there. Najee Marshall played a bunch last year. I think they still got Jaden Hardy. Didn't they sign Dante Exum to a new deal? Oh, Max Christie's still on the team, who we're not even going to talk about. So they have all these guys. They're pretty deep when healthy. And Kyrie's the only one that's, I think, out to start the year, which makes it very hard to argue for any of the fringier guys to be in the mix. It's also why the D'Lo thing might explode in our face. They might run lineups that don't have a point guard and just sort of see how it works, run the offense through somebody else. But I do think, at least at the beginning, they're going to want someone like D'Angelo Russell to get the ball to Anthony Davis in the right spot, to get the ball to Derek Lively when he's right in front of the rim, to get the ball to Klay when he's open for three, to get the ball to Cooper Flagg so he doesn't have to do too much. So that's why I'm a bit higher on D'Lo than I am on some of these other guys. Hey, my voice is hanging in there. Let's talk about Cooper Flagg before we wrap this things up. The Yahoo page doesn't even have his picture up there yet. That's hilarious. He's going to get drafted, and he probably should get drafted in fantasy leagues, but he's probably also going to get drafted too soon because that's what happens with rookies. Flagg is going to be awesome. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He had he had a great fantasy season even in college, which is pretty unusual for like big wing types, which is where he's at. He averaged his college numbers in his 1 year at Duke: 19 points, 7.5 boards, 4 assists, almost 3 blocks, steals and blocks combined, 1.5 threes. He shot 48% from the field, 84% at the free throw line. This is all very translatable, which is the good news. The bad news is he's probably not going to get dropped straight into a massive usage role. So thought process here is, I don't think I can tell you where I would draft Cooper. I kind of need to see where he's going. But I'll also say this. If in some magical universe he doesn't go early, I would consider it. There are very few rookies that I consider on this show. You guys know that about me. The ones that I usually consider, if any, are big men who can shoot free throws. Chet Holmgren being sort of the last example of that. Mark Williams was someone that we looked at as well on the show. I think we did a couple of shows. David Williams, I think, from Lincoln back like 2-3 years on that one. But Cooper Flagg, unfortunately, he comes in with a lot more hoopla around him than someone like a Mark Williams did. So, that was a guy that you could look at really late. Cooper, you're not going to be able to get all that late. Like, this is a guy who's going to get drafted inside the top 100 easily. Odds are Flagg probably gets drafted inside the top 75. And now you're starting to get into a spot where you're going to be dealing with some tough months before you get to the good. But man, you can almost guarantee there's going to be a sweet surge for Cooper at some point this year. And I just don't know how long it's going to take for it to show up. So what would I do? I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. But he is one of the rookies that I'm not going to say no to because he can shoot free throws, because he had a good field goal percent even in college, because he does all the things that translate to fantasy value. You can't write him off. He doesn't come in with all the messes that a lot of college kids do. Oh, he's a point guard. He's going to have huge turnovers and terrible field goal percent. Oh, he's a big man who shoots 57% at the foul line. Flagg doesn't have those I can't say red flags. It's too dumb. He doesn't have those issues in his fantasy game that we have to worry about. He's going to have the learning curve stuff, but the other stuff isn't there. And like, he's that type of, not a once in a generation, because we just had Wemby come along, but he is one of those potential generational talents that can be good in fantasy almost right out of the chute. I think as I sort of talk it through here on air, that 75 is not an absurdly terrible spot to look at him. I mean, that's a spot where you could get Ivica Zubac last year, and there will probably be some really good picks in that range. But if your main targets are off the board, it's probably not an awful spot. He'll probably be better than that near the end of the season, but he's going to be worse than that at the beginning, and that's what you have to sort of ready your mind for. Hey guys, my voice survived. Thanks for hanging in there today, everyone. I'm Dan Bespers for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Please subscribe on your way out. You'll get all the amazing content we've got here available on the feed. And then you'll also, if you check it out on YouTube, you can get stuff from our other incredible hosts as well. Have a great Wednesday. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. So long for now.